Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Comp and Coffee. I am Ruth Thomas, Chief Product Evangelist here at PayScale. And as we start to close out 2023 and move into 2024, we wanted to really center our discussion today around PayScale's end of year report that is going to be published on December the 13th. I'm just double checking that date with Amy. Yes, she's nodding her head. Fantastic report. It covers the state of the labour market. It goes over some of the hot jobs that we see in our data, those with the highest wage growth. And this year also, we've included some predictions from our thought leaders. So we thought it was a great topic to chat about in this episode. And I've got two fantastic participants today. First of all, let's welcome Lexi Clarke. Lexi is our Chief People Officer here at PayScale. Welcome, Lexi.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm sure many of you have seen Lexi on webinars and events that we've run here at PayScale, but this is your first Comp and Coffee, so there's no special initiation ceremony, but just welcome. Right. So. But a face that you do know and a name that you do know from Comp and Coffee is Amy Stewart, our fantastic Associate Director of Content Marketing, and she is the author of the end of year report. So she's going to be filling us on the details of the report. So thank you both very much for joining me today. So before we dig into the topic, let's kind of reflect on the time of year we're in. We're all getting ready for Christmas. I was just saying we can't go too wide angle on my camera at the moment because there's an awful lot of Christmas mess happening behind me. But one of the things we also think about in this time is food or potentially drink. So Amy, let's start with you. Do you have a favorite festive food, or what is a kind of a traditional food for you or your family at this time of year?
I really love gingerbread, not gingerbread cookies or gingerbread candies, but like you get a Betty Crocker box of gingerbread and you make it in a pan and you eat it as like little squares of gingerbread. The challenge is that those little boxes are hard to find. I have to go to like specialty stores to order them, but I like to make gingerbread every year this time of year.
We actually get our gingerbread dough from IKEA. They have gingerbread dough. Yes.
Oh, I have no idea.
Yep. Yeah. So I have it 2 blocks of that sitting in my fridge waiting for one of my daughters to make. And what about you, Lexi? Favorite festive food or tipple or at this time of year?
Yes, this is fudge season in our family, and so any day now we will start making some batches of fudge that I like to throw in the freezer, and then I can eat for a little bit longer. And to what Amy said, cut off a little square and enjoy. But this is homemade fudge season, and I look forward to it every single year. Every single year.
Do you give it as gifts to people?
We do. We do give it as gifts to people, or I just give it as a gift to myself, eating it over and over and over again. Either works. Either works.
Yes, I'm trying to think. They're sweet. I'm not really a sweet tooth person, although we do seem to end up every Christmas with like a massive bowl with everybody's favorite sort of sweet thing in there. Turkish delight is for some reason one thing that we all seem to love in the family at this time of year. Not quite sure why, but yeah. So, well, I'm feeling hungry already. Let's get on and talk about the topic, and then we can all go and grab something to eat. So there's quite a lot in this end of year report, Amy. Can you start us off by sharing some of the headlines, particularly around the labour market, key labour market trends that we're seeing?
Yeah, so to create this report, we analyze data from a couple of sources. We look at the JOLTS data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. We also pulled numbers on unemployment, labor force participation, and the Consumer Price Index, which is a look at inflation over time. And we also look at PayScale's wage growth data, as well as our general employee reported data to identify what the hot jobs are from 2023. So in this case, these are the fastest growing jobs by wage growth, and also the jobs that people are quitting the most or want to quit the most with their associated median pay. And we have a couple of key findings this year, which are always exciting, but I feel like the last couple of years, the labor economy has been just a real interesting topic for HR and folks in general. So we did see that in 2023 that the economy slowed, but I would describe it as an uncertain economic position right now. We don't know if we're about to go into a recession or if we just had a period of slowed growth and we're going to be poised then for a revival in 2024. It could really go either way. We did see that layoffs and unemployment are not as egregious as people were expecting. So in the beginning of 2023, there was this anticipation that we would go into a recession, that there would be a rebalancing of the market with unemployment going up. But right now, both layoffs and unemployment are below historical averages, and the labor market is still strong. However, it's a little bit of a weird market. It's a difficult market, I think, for both employers and employees. Despite having cooled off, it feels very frantic and very maddening. So we're going to talk a little bit about why that is in the report and a little bit also on this podcast.
Great, thank you. And I think one of the things you look at is the ratio between job openings and hires.
Yep.
And we're still seeing that there are more job openings than hires. And it kind of get this feeling of that, there's still hard to fill roles out there for employers. I'm interested to hear both your views on this, but Amy, do you want to start us off?
Yes, I have a lot that I can say about this. I'll try to be concise, but you are absolutely right. The job openings are elevated well above what they were before 2019. They have come down. They're getting close to where they were in 2019, but the ratio of hires to job openings is inverted. If you look back historically, like pre-pandemic, back before the Great Recession area, those lines used to be much more closely tied together. And for many reasons, jobs are staying open for longer and not getting filled, despite many, many people applying for those roles. So we definitely want to look at that as one of the kind of key areas of interest in this particular labor market, which I think is valuable for both HR and hiring managers on the employer side, and also valuable for people who are looking for a new job, who are caught in the layoffs and are unemployed and are trying to figure out, how do I navigate this situation right now? Because it is particularly challenging. One thing to note is that one of the challenges that's impacting the labor market currently is that labor force participation is at historic lows, and that has been true for decades. And we have not even caught up to pre-pandemic levels with labor force participation, and this is likely only to get worse because birth rates have gone down around the world, in part due to unaffordability, and boomers are hitting retirement. So we're seeing fewer people in the workforce, like holistically, which creates some of these challenges. But as mentioned, for knowledge workers in particular, it does not feel like an employee's market. We are hearing about, anecdotally, very highly qualified job seekers just struggling to get seen, to get through interview processes, to get hired. Processes are getting increasingly drawn out. We've heard stories of people who are asked to do assignments as part of their interview loop and then are unpaid for that work and also don't get the job. And also the employers use that work within their company without paying for it. And that creates a lot of negative tension, I think, in the hiring processes. And just kind of listening to that kind of consumer experience does create a lot of questions for me. One of the big questions is, why are jobs that are open not getting filled or not getting filled very fast? In 2023, we're just seeing it potentially that people are not able to find the folks with the skills that they need. So getting a lot of applications, but those skills are not necessarily the right combination of things that employers are looking for. But there's also pushback on that. Like, is it really that you're not getting the right skills? Or are you being too picky about the skills that you need and looking for, 100% of the qualifications rather than 70 or 80% that you then add training to? So there's a lot of disagreement, I think, about what the right processes are. And when you have AI adding to that, it can create an even higher bar to meet all of the keywords that are in the job description with your resume, which can weed out potentially good candidates. So we are seeing that. And then the question for Comp and Coffee in particular is, if you are looking for people with 100% of the skills in the job description, does that mean you need to pay them at the top of the range? And are people doing that? So that is a very interesting question to me. And I'm be fascinated to hear what Lexi has to say about this, about the AI piece, about how recruiting is going on right now, from her perspective as a people leader.
Yeah. So what are you seeing, Lexi, from the practitioner's perspective? Any of those trends resonate with you?
Yeah. I mean, I think especially on the recruiting and hiring front, I mean, we have seen anecdotally, even as we've had open roles at PayScale, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of applications are coming in within 24 hours of opening the role. And so I think if we think about the last few years, but especially the last 12 months, and all of the headlines around layoffs and kind of massive amount of folks looking for new opportunities because maybe their role was impacted, or even more so, layoffs have such a strong impact on overall engagement of employee populations. And generally, even the folks that maybe were not directly impacted, maybe this is their time that they're starting to look around. I mean, we are seeing, our recruiting team really kind of drowning in those applications, trying to sort through and find the right folks and the right skills. I also just think behaviorally, when you see the market shift in this direction to what Amy was really sharing, I think there's an interesting response of looking for someone that is 110% qualified, maybe for that role, or trying to vet through that. And some of that, I think, is a response from a leadership standpoint to no longer being in a period of growth, right? And it is easier when you are in a period of growth and you have more opportunity and budget to fill more seats than it is when you are in a time where you've got to be really specific around your hiring needs, your talent, and maybe what those skills are, to Amy's point. And I think that causes leaders to not necessarily know exactly what they want. And I think that has such an impact on what we're seeing on the recruiting front. I also think I mentioned this briefly on just the retention side of things, but I do think a couple things have not gone away. And I think that employer-employee friction has not gone away, is not going away. Even with the impact that I think that we've seen in the labor market and layoffs, you are still seeing employees advocate for wanting to be at a company that provides them flexibility, that provides them some kind of mission that they can feel really strongly a part of. And that means that when companies are having to make decisions like doing layoffs or having impacted folks, those employees that are sticking around are really looking for something from their employer. And hopefully they're getting it. And that is how you retain folks. But if they're not, I think that adds to what we're seeing in the labor market as well. And so I think retention and engagement more critical than ever. Compensation is such a large part of that, and it's specifically transparency around compensation. But, I would say that report resonates with, tactically what I am seeing and hearing every single day. And anecdotally, when I'm talking to peers at other companies, other organizations, or even, employees that are trying to navigate what they want to do next. I think it's spot on for what many companies and many HR leaders are going through.
Thanks, Lexi. So we obviously spend quite a lot of time thinking about the labour market, and the reason we do that is because it significantly drives wages, and that's what we're all about here at PayScale. It's like we're all about pay. So Amy, from the observations of the labour market, what impact do we think this will have on wages as we pivot into 2024?
Yeah, so wages are going to go up. Wages always go up. We don't ever see wages go down, but the rate of growth has relaxed in most sectors, but most sectors, not all sectors. So that is a little bit of an individualistic thing. You do have to look it up for your particular jobs in your particular industry. Healthcare is an example of an industry where wages are growing faster than other sectors. Typically, wage growth maps to inflation, and inflation is coming down. It is currently at just over 3%. The target is 2%. So if the market can bear it, we may continue to see increased interest rates. However, it's also an election year, so there may be some tension around lowering interest rates to keep the economy strong. Not quite sure how that's going to bear out in 2024, but definitely something to keep an eye on. But so far, the market has borne those increased interest rates. We did not go into a recession the way that many banks prophesied that we would at the beginning of 2023. And because we do have those labor shortages, we are technically still in an employees market heading into 2024. High rates are obviously a struggle for businesses, especially in certain sectors like technology startups that rely on investment in order to facilitate growth because they take loans as companies in order to manifest the growth of those businesses. There are other indicators that the economy is strong. Black Friday did $9.8 billion just in online sales, and Cyber Monday was even stronger. So we're in a mixed market. We're in an uncertain market. We don't know exactly what is going to happen, and that certainly can impact wage growth. As far as, do we think that pay is going to be as high in 2024 as it was in 2023? If we look at PayScale's salary budget survey, the answer is yes. Employers are continuing to give higher wages than they did pre-pandemic, so over 3%. PayScale's analysis showed 3.8%. I've seen 4% from other institutions, even higher than that in a couple of areas. And that is a really fantastic story for organizations that follow through with that in 2024, because this is the first time that we will see wage growth exceed inflation in the last couple of years. And we know that employees are hungry for that, that they deserve that, given that just because inflation is going down doesn't mean that prices have gone down, although there is a potential that we will see deflation in 2024.
Great, thank you. And Lexi, I know you're going to be starting to ramp up for comp season here at PayScale, and you're probably thinking about market data and market trends right at the moment. So without giving too much away to any PayScale employees who might be listening into Comp and Coffee, how are you seeing the trends? I mean, what are you thinking about as you're preparing budgets going into 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that Amy said is spot on. Just from what we're thinking about internally, we have kicked off budget season. And I would say our budgets for 2024 will look pretty similar to what they look like in 2023. There's a couple things that we always keep in mind for our cycles. One is, what's the market impact and what has been the market impact. And so we'll do it. We are almost done with doing a market analysis heading into Q1 of 2024. We also obviously look from a fairness and equity standpoint on any adjustments that we might need to make from hires that we've made through the year. But for our normal comp cycle, we are charging ahead as normal. And I would say that salary budget survey, that 3.8%, we're hovering right in there as well, along with everyone else. And we have really intentionally, even as we've made financial shifts within the organization, really tried to keep that budget whole or more favorable, because we know that that's such a big part of an employee's life cycle at the company. And then, using all of the things that we've used in previous years around education and transparency and some of those things, that goes right along with those budget conversations.
Yeah, I mean, we've really seen pay jump as a key engagement issue in the last 2 years against this context of the cost of living crisis. So pay's very much still on employees' mind. As Amy said, real wages have still not really caught up. And it will take a while probably for prices to come down in line with, falling inflation. So I think employees will be thinking very, like, how much was my increase going to be in 2024? So it looks like it'll probably be good news for employees, as we're predicting. And employers really need to kind of be aware of that there's no kind of like easy kind of cop out in terms of, oh, right, we're going into a bad economy, or we may go into recession, and therefore we can cut wages. So, well, 2022, 2023 really have been, from a labour market, employer hiring market, it's been pretty turbulent, Lexi. What were the key things that you've learnt over this period in your role kind of as a chief people officer?
Yes, turbulent is the right word, I believe, Ruth. And we talk about this all the time, but I think, listen, there's a couple of things, and I think one of which I think is exciting, which is the headline that I always talk about, which is, I don't think there's ever been a more exciting, impactful, strategic time to be in HR, in the people functions. We are seeing in the chief people officer seat and just the teams in general, this is finally being treated as a business function. Ruth and Amy have heard me say this before. I'll withhold my personal feelings on why it took this long. But I'm excited, I think, to see that recognition that speaks to the turbulence and the need and the criticality of this role in these teams through the last few years. I think, listen, if we've learned anything, it is you should not approach compensation or any of your people practices in the way that you did pre-pandemic. And in fact, it's a really, really healthy activity as a part of annual planning every single year to revisit exactly what you're doing, what has changed over the last 12 months. I think the market, the labor market, employee sentiment, all of these things are shifting faster than ever. And a lot of that is data being at folks' fingertips. And so it is on those functions to help guide the rest of the business along the way and support and utilize companies' biggest asset, which is all of their people and all of their employees. I would also say, overarchingly, from a transparency standpoint, we talk about transparency a lot as it relates to pay transparency legislation. I think over the last few years, especially as companies have had to go down in headcount or make tough decisions around reductions, that transparency is a key pillar to their strategy, is the thing that will keep your employees in seat. If your employees feel like you are being authentic and honest in real time as much as you can around what's going on within the business or what they can expect, and you're commitment to that transparency holds true in every single thing that you do, that's how you engage and retain your folks and pay them well and pay them fairly and all of those other pieces that I think just kind of come with an assumption of talking about compensation, all of us working at PayScale. But I do think that transparency is huge. And if you are a practitioner on this call, think about the ways in which you have or have not been kind of transparent with your employees and start to think about what that transparency looks like for you as an organization. And you can always start small wins.
I think it's going to be really interesting. We look back in kind of another 3 years' time and look back on this 5-year period since the pandemic and actually really reflect on how much has changed in terms of, how we manage pay, how we manage people, how we, hire people and how we engage people, where we get people to work. It's probably when you actually sit back and look at it, it's going to be really interesting to think, wow, did that really all happen in that, short period of time? So. Okay, well, another thing we include in this report, which I think is quite the fun couple of lists that we have, is the hot jobs list. Amy, can you tell us about those two lists and a few highlights from the kind of what were the top trending jobs this year?
I absolutely can. Very excited about the hot jobs list this year. As you mentioned, there are two lists. We provide a top list of jobs that people are looking to quit or are quitting, which is heavily populated by healthcare positions and technology positions. And you can see that full list in our report. But the main list that we're spending more time on this year is the top in-demand jobs by wage growth. And that wage growth varies from 18% increase in wages from last year to 24%. So much higher than the 8% average that we're talking about when we talk about salary increases for the workforce as a whole. And this list, interestingly, this year includes a lot of highly skilled blue collar positions. It includes positions like master plumber, hairstylist, automotive body repairer, AV technicians, animators, and self-employed positions like fitness coach, which speak to some of the frustrations that people are feeling in the marketplace and their desire to be their own boss and run their own business. Also, the most interesting one on the list from my perspective that made it this year is job coach or career coach. So there is a growing position out there. You'll see a lot of folks on LinkedIn who are offering career counseling services to people who are struggling to get hired, who are looking to figure out what it is they want to do with their lives. And this was a big theme throughout the Great Resignation. People really took stock of, what am I doing with my life? What are my values? What would actually make me happy? And a term that we are seeing more in the marketplace is work-life fit rather than work-life balance. So rather than just thinking about the 8 hours a day, if you work that much that you spend at the job and having flexibility to eat dinner with your kids and spend time at home, it's more than that. It's about how the job fits into your life rather than how you make your life fit into the job. And so there's a lot of soul searching and analysis, like self-internal reflection that people are doing. And job coaches are out there to help people figure that out, to help them navigate the complexity and difficulty of the current job market, and help people who are feeling burned out, who feel like that they're not valued, really assess what it is they want from their lives and from their jobs, and to get those things, to position themselves well to go after those things. So I think that's a pretty exciting finding. And from what I've seen from our hot jobs list in the past, it can be a bellwether. Compensation analyst was on the list 2 years ago. Yeah. And I think that was a good indicator of things to come that people should be paying attention to.
I was going to mention that. Amy's going to tell you when we close out on this episode where you can find that job report so you can see those lists. But I had seen the last couple of weeks a New World at Work report that highlighted the demand for compensation professionals over the last 2 to 3 years. And that's probably, they're trending it back to the first pay transparency legislation that passed in Colorado. And what they're showing is that, now we need more compensation professionals to help organizations put in place those fundamentals of compensation that are required to make sure that you can enact pay transparency effectively, so that you're not upsetting your internal employees when you're posting ranges, and also making sure those ranges are competitive for you to be able to attract candidates. And I think their study was showing that there hadn't necessarily been a huge number of new entrants to the market. And so that was obviously driving up pay. So good news for all of those compensation professionals listening in to us today. So the third thing that I mentioned that we covered in this report is also predictions. So Amy worked with some of the thought leaders in the organization, one of those being you, Lexi. So do you want to give us a sneak peek into kind of your top predictions for 2024?
Yes, I would love to. And I think this is an interesting one, especially. I think we've seen the market start to be a little bit more balanced. And I think there were a lot of thoughts heading into this year to say, well, if the market gets really tough, do employees lose some of that bargaining power that maybe they had before? And the answer through and through is no. I think employees still really hold that bargaining power. And I think what that looks like is that they want leaders who really respect that flexibility, any autonomy that they've gained over the last few years. And they want a workplace that reflects their own values, personal values, any of those different things. I think as we look to 2024, I think we will see the term work-life balance maybe start to go away, and maybe we'll index more heavily to work-life fit, which means that coming out of the last, it is hard to believe, by the way, 4 years since 2020 and the beginning of the pandemic, all of us, I think, have increasingly looked for jobs that fit our lives and reprioritized and rebalanced. We've talked, Ruth, you and I have talked, I think, a year ago around, hustle culture is going away. And now what does this really look like? And I think we will continue to see that in 2024. Instead of employees having to fit their lives around their jobs, they want a job that is going to fit well within their life. And I think for HR leaders, that means that we need to adapt to that shift, because I think it'll impact everything from total compensation packages to all other different facets of the employee life cycle. I think, Ruth, you mentioned a couple things. Next year, obviously, is an election year. And I do think the labor economy will be a highly debated, fuel-heated topic as we go into next year. We talked about that work-life fit a little bit as well. I don't think any recession will override that. I think employees' bargaining power is here to stay, and we've got to get really comfortable with that and involving our employees in the solutions. I think labor unrest will continue. So we'll continue to see labor strikes, unionization, some of those things maybe continue to increase as well. I think what will continue to be a debate on this mandated return to work, not return to work, all of those different things. I think mandating return to office will still be a struggle. That speaks to the overarching theme that employees are looking for that flexibility. I think we'll continue to see that one size fits all means one size fits none from a benefits and reward standpoint, which means they'll become, I think, more inclusive and varied, depending on role, depending on the organization. And I think we've all got to figure out how to get a little bit more in touch with our human side. And so I think we'll continue to see human-centered recruiting necessary in order to offset some of those talent shortages. So I think it will continue to be a very interesting and probably continually turbulent year ahead of us, especially as we think about everything being anchored in an election year. But I think really, if you are an HR leader on this call, I would embrace some of that turbulence and make sure that you're talking to your employees and really deeply understanding what they're looking for and what they need, and then helping them understand where the company can meet them from there. And I think meeting your employees where you are, maybe that's the mantra going into next year.
Well, it doesn't sound like your job's going to get any easier next year then, Lexi, I don't think.
No. But I'm in for the fun. I'm in for the fun, right? I'm in for the fun.
Okay, Amy, what about you? You compiled the report and you've been working with us all in terms of prediction. What's your top prediction for 24?
Yeah, not to overplay the point, but I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on the talent market and hiring experiences in 2024. You don't want to lose your people, so you need to pay them fairly. And this is a great year to make up for some of the deficits of previous years, if you can afford to do so when it comes to pay increases. Inflation, again, is coming down, but we are still not in a deflationary period. So people are really, I think, anticipating and hoping to make some money back from what they've lost over the last couple of years when inflation got as high as, I think, 9% in 2022, which really hurts people, especially at the lower end spectrum of wages. I also want to tell people that it's good to be aware that the spirit of the Great Resignation is still with us. Although we are technically out of the Great Resignation, that feeling of wanting to have a better work experience is still very much with us. And I think that's where job coaches are showing up on that top list of hot jobs. So as an employer, really thinking about how you can provide positive employee experiences to give employees more autonomy over what their jobs are and how they show up at work can help alleviate some of that stress and some of that anxiety that people are feeling that causes them to have grass is greener syndrome and hit the employment market looking for other opportunities. So as much as you can do to train managers on your culture and employee experiences and expectations, I think that's going to help with the talent market simmering down and the economy hopefully growing, if not the beginning of 2024. Fingers crossed towards the end of 2024.
Great, thank you. And we didn't even talk about AI. And I know we've got quite a
whole
few
separate
predictions
thing on that.
I know we could talk a long time about AI. Well, thank you both very much for joining me today. As you can see, quite a lot packed into that report. The end of year report will be posted on payscale.com underneath our research and insights section. And that goes live again on December the 13th, I think, Amy. So whenever you're listening to this episode, you'll be able to go there and dig into that report for more. So thank you very much again. Sorry, both of you, for joining me. What do you think, audience? Do you think we've missed anything? What's top of your priority list for 2024? If you haven't, I will just do a quick shout out to our compensation best practice report. We are fielding for that at the moment. It's the industry's largest compensation survey that will come out in the new year, and we will spend time talking about that on one of our episodes. But it's really your kind of like key guide to the trends of what happened in 23 and what practitioners are planning to do in 2024. So please participate in that study as well, and we'll share some of those results with you in the new year. Well, thank you again. Thank you very much. And whatever you're doing over the festive period and whatever you're eating, be it gingerbread or fudge, please enjoy, and thank you very much.